Good evening, everybody. I'm Carol Aronson, board member of California and on the speaker committee. And I'm really excited to bring our former board member, Marilee Kuhlmann, who has been a landscape designer for over 25 years, has taken the time to get her landscape contractor's license, and is specializing in very many prestigious projects and is well known for her work in water harvesting, which she's going to be talking about today. So come on up, Marilee.
Okay, I'm going to start out with I had cataract surgery, so I might be a little dizzy, more than usual. So if I start to fall over, it's nothing serious. It's the right eye, and I can see color. It's just amazing. Okay, here we go. The important thing on this slide is this is the driest month of the year, and that's driest because it's the lowest amount of rain that we get throughout the whole year.
Can you put the mic a little closer?
And slide 3, which tells you who I am, is blank. I've been landscape designing for 25 years. I started with Comfort Zones Garden Design, and about 2015, I think it was, I decided to form another company with a landscape architect, and we formed Urban Water Group, Inc., and that's 9 years ago now. And so we concentrate on doing full service landscape design with usually every kind of rainwater harvesting that you can think of. So tonight's topic is, I had a number of different presentations that I've done, and I went through a lot of them, and I thought, well, I'll use that one, and no, I don't do that anymore, I don't do that one anymore. And so I decided to do a chronological presentation of each year having a garden of what I did, because I wanted to put it together that way initially to see what I had been doing and whether I could see what the transitions were. And it ended up that it really came to, I started out with a lot of devices, rain harvesting equipment and all this other stuff. And I've really come full circle to getting as much nature as I can and putting the devices in. So we're going to watch that arc as it goes through. The other thing about me is I love to travel. I've been around the world to all the Mediterranean climates of the world just to see what the plants do in each one of those regions. The only one that I haven't been to is Chile. Not sure if I'm ever going to get there, but I've been to all the other ones. So I like to see what other people are doing, what other kind of emphasis there are. I've gone to the Chelsea Flower Show so many times I lost count. And I thought, well, some of my favorite gardens, I thought, what is it about those gardens that I like? This is 2012. Joe Swift, who, if you watch the Chelsea Flower Show video coverage every year, he's one of the announcers. But his garden back in 2012, there wasn't a plant in this garden that I could not have used in any garden in Southern California. And that was the first time that I'd seen that particular thing. I usually go in and I go, well, I could substitute that with this, and I could substitute that with this. But this one, you can see it had the iris, it had everything in it could be used. In addition to presenting water in a very pleasing way. This was 2006. I think this is my all-time favorite. This was done by Tom Stewart Smith, who, if you look him up on Google, he's doing some incredible work, doing some nonprofit work and teaching plant management and things like that in England. His wife is a psychiatrist and has written an amazing book called The Well-Tended Mind. It's just a beautiful book, and the two of them together are like, to me, the greatest couple in the world. I mean, they're just amazing. And what I liked about this garden was kind of that green frontage, but then this wild mass of perennials that seemed more manageable than the actual traditional English border. This is another part of that. I think this was the first time that I noted that the garden that was done at Chelsea. They're about $500,000 to produce these gardens at the Chelsea Flower Shop. This one actually went to his house. And so if you see his website, you see the results of this garden as it's growing in his own house. This one, I don't remember what year it was, I couldn't remember the designer. But notice the density of the planting. And I think that's why I like this garden. It's not so much the oak beams running through it, that didn't, it was like interesting, but I really like the density of the plants. That kind of range to me. This is this year. This one won gold. Those discs up there are rainwater harvesting catching devices, and they were planted. So it filters the water in addition to going down, and then there's water courses that the filtered water goes into. Planting was lovely. I have some other pictures of the permeable hardscape. It was a beautiful thing to see that rainwater harvesting, even in England where it rains a lot, was an emphasis. There was a number of gardens that were doing that. Even if they weren't rainwater harvesting, there was still water elements in it, which are important. I don't think I've ever done a garden that doesn't have a water element in it. These are some more dense planting, different ways to do water elements or water movement. And then some really bizarre ones. Old cisterns. Why is that sitting there? I couldn't understand why it was sitting there. The upper right there, where you have the gabion that's full of recycled stuff, that tube that's there is an old fire hose. And they have it stuffed with things so that insects can go and live in there, which I thought was kind of cool. So it's recycling something that I've never seen that kind of a thing used in the garden before. This was the other major rainwater harvesting garden where they emulated rain. So it rained on the building and it showed you the cycle of how it went on the rain. It went down into the lead planters and then it fell into a pond. And then the different kinds of permeable paving. And then the very intense meadow-like planting. I apologize, some of the text is coming up dark on this computer. So that's that black, so it's naturalistic planting design. One of the best books on naturalistic planting design is by Nigel Dunnett. And while I was over in England in May, we went up to see some of the stuff that he's done. One in Sheffield in the UK, where they've taken the gray, horrible four-lane streets going through downtown LA, or downtown sections, and then they redid it for harvesting the rain and stopping the flood in that area. It was quite amazing. The other one, he was hired to take the moat at the Tower of London and do meadow planting. They call it the super bloom, which was really fun because he published his book. We had him out and we had a lecture for APLD. And I took him to see the super bloom. Then he goes back to England and does the super bloom. That's me, I'm sure. Okay, so let's get back into Los Angeles. So for us, all the things I'm going to talk about are available in a number of different publications. The right-hand column is a list from Pamela Gersler's G3LA website of all the publications that have been written on this subject, paid for by water agencies. So these are downloadable free PDFs. The other one that is, if you're a beginner in rainwater harvesting, Brad Lancaster's book, the second volume, is really good about documenting in a DIY way how to do all this stuff. Where you won't need a designer, you can really kind of do it on your own. Okay. So some of us get it, some of us are not paying attention. But we've got a planet that's not got the temperatures that it used to. Rain isn't staying where it used to be. We've got floods, we've got all kinds of stuff. And the saying that I heard a few years ago was that the dry periods are going to get drier, and they are. The warm periods are going to get warmer. The cold periods will be colder. We're not experiencing that, but I wish. And the wet periods are wetter. And so that's part of the changing world. Like how do we deal with that? So if you're not familiar with our rain cycles here in Los Angeles, we are a Mediterranean climate, probably all heard about Mediterranean climates, but we are the driest for the longest period of all the Mediterranean climates. France, maybe 3 to 4 months, and they get a summer monsoon. And their highest temperature, the research is under 100. Maybe not anymore, but Greece is closer to us because it's very windy. They have a shorter dry period, but because of the winds, it probably has the same effect. Right? So we all know that we use plants for those areas because they're similar to the microclimates that we have. Our average used to be 15 inches of rain. This last year, I have a rain gauge in one of the gardens at the Mandeville Canyon, and my rain gauge this year was 33.3 inches of rain. Last year, it was 33. To figure out how much, I'm not going to go through this whole slide, I'm just going to say this is the math to convert inches of rain to gallons. There's a number of different ways to do it. Basically, take a square footage of something and you multiply 0.62, and you come up with a number for each inch of rain, multiply it by how many inches of rain you're going to get. Since this will be online, I'm going to just keep going. So, how do we survive in our temperatures? How do we get through these hot, dry summers? People are saying, should we use less water? We need to provide habitat. We need to be fire resistant. All these things are coming up. But are we doing the right thing in order to make these things happen? So let's look to nature. Does it have irrigation on this mountainside? Notice where the water goes when it rains. And that's where the plants are. So if we can mimic something like that, where we create a place where the water can go when it's raining, we're doing what nature's doing. In order to do that, you have to have soil that functions. On the right-hand side, you see compacted soil. That's what you usually have in your turf because people are walking on it. It's just a kind of dead zone. It needs to have plants, it needs to have roots, it needs to have aeration, it needs to have biology, and that's what keeps it open. And hopefully one of the talks soon will be about soil. Because in this talk, I can't go through all of that also. So let's just talk about how much rain comes into a site, into the different ways. So if you look at a tree, I think I have a slide, I can skip it. I went back and I counted how many trees I've planted in my career so far. 351. So if you take a brand new tree, and it's young, it doesn't have a big root zone, so say it was 10 by 10, 10 feet wide by 10 feet wide, and the root zone, because it's brand new, it's not very big, is 4 feet deep. If you do the math, that has the capacity to hold 9,494 gallons. Perennials with grasses, a meadow, say 1,600 feet. So 40 by 40, which is about the size of a normal garden. 1 foot of roots, 37,580 gallons. Turf, which is not very deep rooted, so we can only go maybe 4 inches, over the same slice of land that the perennials is in, only 12,000 gallons. So from a harvesting standpoint in nature, that's not optimum. It was really hard to find a picture of grass because I've never put it in. So this is my house before I converted it. Then I put it in a vegetable garden. So a lot of people are doing their drought tolerant thing. They're putting in a dry bush, a rock, gravel. That's not going to harvest water. Has anybody ever seen these, the prairie grasses and how deep the roots are? Remember when I did that calculation? I did 1 foot. These pictures are showing 15 feet. So the soil has so much more capacity when you're using the right plants to get that soil open to basically absorb that water. But we live here, we have to have a place to live. So I look at this as, what am I going to do about rainwater harvesting? Everybody goes, well, just let the rain land on the land. That's all you really need to do. You know? But look at the places where the rain can't get in. The streets, the roofs, the driveways, the patios. That water is wasted if you don't catch it. The normal habitat, those that want to do conversion and go back to nature and put in all these natives, we don't have a native environment anymore because we're washing that water away. So we need to get back into getting that soil restored and collecting that water. So we start doing stuff like rain gardens, swales. The upper right-hand corner is a close-up of Sheffield in England, where they're taking the street and the runoff from the sidewalks and putting them into the borders. The one in the center top, that's a rain garden. It's the overflow coming from cisterns and a bunch of other stuff on that property, which we'll go through. The bottom one is the rainwater harvesting area for a demonstration garden we did in Las Vegas. And the ones on the left are how much water is going to the ocean that we're not catching. Billions and billions of gallons of water. So what we do is we do something called the watershed approach. So if you look at the watershed for the United States, you see where all the rivers and streams kind of come together. You look at it from our area, and where does the water go? Those are all different watersheds and where they go. But for your property, you look at your house, and your roof is the top of your watershed. And so that's what you look at, is how am I going to get the roof water to be a mini watershed and keep that on the property. So you can do passive, just let it go, kind of where it goes, kind of makes rivets and things, or we can do something active by collecting it and then putting it in the garden later. So that's kind of the definition of passive and active. So bringing all those principles, we have to do something with the soil. I didn't talk about it, but because I'm not talking specifically about plants, but we need to have our keystone species. If anybody's read Doug Calumet's work, he talks about keystone species. If you look at the native plant communities, the chaparral, the coastal sage scrub, there's going to be species in there of significant shrubs and trees that need to be in our landscape. Doug Calumet talks about the oak tree in his front yard. He has ID'd 642 different species on that one tree. He has another tree that's native to his area that's only 146. So that's the difference, is the support. So oak trees would be a supporting for our hood. Roost, toyon, all of those big shrubs that feed a lot of birds and for different things. The next one would be mulching, adding a water feature. If you're high fire, making sure that you're keeping your structure clear of anything that's going to catch on fire. And then doing our paving, our permeable paving, to lessen the amount of water that's going to run off the property. We're going to keep it on the property. So I said that I had planted 351 trees. I hadn't ever done that count before, and I was actually quite surprised at how many forest plants I think it's one of my favorite trees. I do a lot of pink trumpets. I do a lot of Brisbane box. I do a lot of coast live oak. I do ironwoods a lot, if it's not in a too hot neighborhood. I do eagleman oaks, valley oaks. Forest pansies is probably one of my most common species. No, I think Cavalier cherry is my most common. So Cavalier cherry is my ficus equivalent. So I'm going to repeat this repeatedly. For every 1% of organic matter, and organic matter can be the roots of plants, in addition to mulch. For every 1% of organic matter that you put into your garden, that can yield the ability to catch 20,000 gallons per acre. So in 2005, what I was doing then, I didn't know what I know today. And I was looking at the gardens that I did back then, and I did use the gaps between the hardscape to collect water. I did a lot of trees. I did a pretty intense planting. You see the meadows that I did. I did a water feature, so I wasn't doing too much. I wasn't really getting the technical side, but I was still kind of functioning on some level. In 2006 was kind of one of the first changes. Santa Monica had a rebate grant. It was a matching grant up to, what was it, 20,000? Anything that they considered sustainable. Drip irrigation, low water use plants, infiltration kits, they would match. So this garden got $15,000 in a matching grant. So we did a $30,000 install and they paid for $15,000 of it. So the orange part, it was a flat roof house. The gutters existed. There was 2 downspouts running down the side. We cut into them and did my first infiltration kit. You see the guys standing in a 5-foot hole. So what we did is we cut the gutter, let it drop into the hole. Now the hole is empty in this picture, but we did put in a device to hold the structure together so it didn't cave in. And then that basically just has the water that saturates down into the soil. Then when it overflows, it went out the original pipe out to the street. So there was 2 of those on the property. So you see the guys working right when we first planted, and then after the plants grew. It was probably 5 or 6 years later. I called the gardener on this today and said, how much water are you using? It was about once a week, we do about 20 minutes with drip. So then I kind of figured that out. I thought, well, I want to make my driveway permeable, so I hired a concrete pouring company, and they came out and sliced open my driveway, and then instead of having the water go out to the street, it saturated in, and where those bands were, I planted trees where it was appropriate. Then I did another one where I had a rain chain going down into a pot, it fell over, and it went into, it's not that weird anymore. It just went down into a creek bed around the tree that existed when I came on the property. And then this is a really small one. I had a garden in Palisades. We took the rain gutters and we made these stepping stones, and when it rains, it just fills up just barely to the top of this, not quite, it doesn't cover the stones because the drain is set so we just go to the street that way. Because there was some very mature podocarpus in this garden. Another landscape grant in Santa Monica. This is another infiltration device. I don't think we do this anymore, too close to the structure, but they okayed it back then. And you can see we dug the hole, we put in the structures that hold the hole open. The piping comes into it, it's all sized for the size of the roof and the amount of water it's going to generate. And then you put the garden on top of it. So then I started noticing in my pictures of the gardens that I did that I was planting more densely with every single garden that I did. It was like I couldn't get enough plants on my list. There was one point where I was going through a city approval and I had 274 species on the plant list. And I was going through the Greenville permit process, and the guy went, "What is this?" I said, "It's the plant list." He goes, "Well, what is this?" And I said, "Well, it's a house." He goes, "What is this?" he thought he had to look under the plant that. After his protest, we finally got the permit. So this is 2 different gardens, but you see how densely I'm planting to try to get as much moisture in there that the roots can function for me. Because for every 1% of increase of organic matter, you're going to be able to harvest more water. Johanna Walcott, who's not here tonight, she used to live down the street from me, and she planted her garden. And I thought, she's more dense than I am. How did she do that? I didn't know how this was going to turn out because it started when she first put in where it was really, really dense. And then as it grew and the trees got bigger, I was like, well, that looks fantastic. Just fantastic. So I started planting more densely. Because for every increase by 1%, you can harvest more water. In Santa Monica, another harvest, not another rebate, where the X is, you can't see because of all the density of my planting. But there's a rain garden in there. We harvested off of their roof. Then they had a problem with the neighbor's portiere that brought water down on their roof and flooded their basement. So we took the downspout off of that property and brought it into this rain garden to alleviate that problem. 2011, Thousand Oaks. Harvested all the water off that rain garden. They've never seen water leave their property. This rain garden has two sides. It kind of has a flat area on one side, and then I did a pipe that goes over and puts it on the other side too. And they've never seen it leave. But in 2011, I finally went, this is something I want to do. I really believe that harvesting water instead of letting it go to the street is the answer. And I needed to be able to make that work. And there wasn't anybody around that would teach you how to do it. So I thought, I need a big project, I need a medium-sized project, and I need a small project to see what that would be. And within a very short period of time, I had contracts. Within 2 weeks, I had contracts for all three. This is a 40,000-gallon cistern. It was custom made in that size. That was the only flat spot on the entire property, was at the top of the ceiling on. And we built this chamber, designed this chamber, and harvested water. You can see there's the general contractor, and Lucas was very excited about cisterns going in, and then the automator and the head gardener for the staff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the functionality of rainwater harvesting. So you've got a roof, water's going to come off the roof, and if you want to move it someplace, you have to basically put a tank someplace and get water there. You can move water, and then you don't have to have the tank right under the downspout. You can have it any place, as long as you've got the elevation. So the basic is, you see the blue, the rain gutter comes down, and then in this scenario, they have a first flush where they're taking the first polluted water, separating that from the one that goes to the tank. I don't do that anymore since I only use the water for landscaping, and it's going to go to landscaping anyway, so I don't usually use first flushes. So it comes down, goes any place. You can go 50, 60, 70 feet across the yard, go any number of ways, and then it comes up and over. And as long as you're on average 12 to 18 inches below the top of that rain gutter, at the top of the downspout, there's enough pressure to take it down and push it over. Take it any place. So we call that a wet system because during the rainy season, the water stays at that blue level. So see the gap down at the bottom of that pipe? At the end of the rainy season, you open up a pipe and you release that water. So that's a wet system. And in order for that to work, the downspouts need to be airtight, all the way to the top of the gutter. So you take off the existing downspouts, use PVC glue to take you off the air. The next one is the dry system, which is the water's not going to sit in the pipe, it's just going to go directly into the tank. So usually those are right under the downspout. The picture below that is a couple tanks strung together. When you take tanks and you string them together, it becomes one volume. So water comes in and all the tanks are connected at the bottom, and the water level rises the same in every single tank. Unlike the rain barrels, as you're in the next picture, the water goes in one tank, it fills up, comes to the top, goes to the overflow, goes to the next top, fills up, goes to the next top, goes down until it goes out. You can do it both ways, but I like to do it from the bottom when I'm using big tanks. The one that says dry system that has a little extra little device in there, that's a pump. So you don't want to, you could do it this way by putting it in the water into a chamber and then pump it into a tank. But I don't do that because when we have power failures in a storm. So if you have a power failure, the pump's not going to work and you can't harvest it. So we try to do gravity feed. we've only got one system where we actually had to pump it. So this is another one from 2001. This is my medium size. This man had this property, he was remodeling his house. He has car collections, so he had a number of structures on the property. He had 3 buildings, the house you see that has the solar panels on it. On the left-hand side in the back, another garage that had 9 cars. On the right, another garage that he was building, and then you see the 4 tanks back there. Those are each 5,000 gallons, strung together at the bottom, so I can harvest 20,000 gallons. Now the roof structures equaled about 7,800 square feet. So if we go back to that map, I think I did it. 7,800 square feet times 0.62 gives you X number of gallons. So for 5,000 gallon tank, irrigation, all that. I have a slide that has the total on it. Anyway, I'm not going to do the math in my head, that would make me nervous. So all of, you see that you got the orange arrows, all of those roofs are linked together through the downspouts, and it's only going to the first tank. Then, because they're all strung together, it fills up equally. All of the hardscape, and then when it overflows, it goes out to the street. We've never seen that. I don't think we've ever seen it go out to the street. Now that I think about it. Then we have 1 or 2 areas which we couldn't get to go to the cistern because it was on the driveway. So we did an infiltration pit under the grass. So you see, there's the infiltration pit. So I calculated this one to capture 1.5 inches of rain, and then it absorbed it. So it can capture 1.5 inches, the next one it can capture, then it can capture, and it can. The reason why I did this is because his property is sitting on top of one of the aquifers in Encino. So we're all getting that water that the water companies can harvest for our benefit. Permeable paving all around. There's another one in Beverly Hills. This was the first time I did anything in Beverly Hills that going through a permit process from that. And this, it's big house, small land. This one just happened to have concrete over the entire backyard, which is a little weird. And then a 2-inch gas line going nowhere. So it ended up that there was a pool underneath the concrete. It had been abandoned, which the city then made me take out. That was fun. So we could only take out half of it. The pool was filled with dirt, so we had to take out half the dirt and take out half the shell because there was no room to do it because there was only a 36-inch gate out to the back. Put that back and then do the next half. Crazy. It's like, why? No. Well, we don't have any permit that was close by. So we did. So this is permeable driveway. I think this is the first time that Carex, which is a lawn substitute, so it's a medium user versus a high water use for turf, in the parkway. Never gets mowed, just a short. Carex Panza is the shorter of the runners, so it has a more common look to kind of long grass. Did 2 infiltration pits on this property. Now, this one is in the hillsides of Encino. There's something called hillside coding. If you've got a code on your property that says hillside, you cannot infiltrate because it means that you're in a typically slide or there's something that could be negative if you just randomly just keep adding water and water and water. So in those cases, you harvest for controlled release through irrigation or you pump it to the street. And in this case, it was only 2011, so I didn't know how to do any of that stuff yet. So in this case, the sump pump is down at the very bottom of the property under a magnolia lawn. Granada Hills, another rebate. This was taking out 5,000 square feet of turf. They wanted to have a native garden or bird watching. So in this one, what we did is you see where the arrows are. there's a downspout coming from the house. I wanted that downspout to come outside of that tree canopy and away from the foundation of the house. So I extended the pipes out 20 feet underground and then did something called an envious pop-up. So that's that little device that you see so that 90 is a white thing down at the bottom. So when water fills it, comes down, pushes that lid up, and the water just comes to wherever that device is. So I took every single device on the house, every downspout, and I brought it out further into the garden. Then did some contouring to keep the water there so it could saturate. So it's like mini little rain gardens all over, but they're fairly flat. Then planted natives. And we'll come back to this because it got a cistern later. This was, I think, 3,500 square feet of turf. But again, hillside, so I couldn't infiltrate. And so this rain garden, you see the darker blue, or the bluish kind of color that kind of emulates that it's a river, but it's not. That one was just a very shallow indentation. And then where that rock is, under the rock, I put a drain so that it would only fill up so much, and then it would go to the stream. So I planted trees all around this area so the trees would get the water, but I wanted to control the amount by raising that overflow to the right inches on the property. Then in 2015, we were asked to do all the designs and the installations of a project for the city of Los Angeles. This was called, it had different names as we go through, but it was the Greater Los Angeles Water Collaborative. And what they wanted to accomplish is they wanted to know what the obstacles were for homeowners in getting a permit. They wanted to know, the cities wanted to know what it looked like, the water agencies, the flood control, all of these different city agencies wanted to know what it looked like for rainwater harvesting for a residential piece of property. So they had about 100 volunteers through tree people that donated their property to be evaluated for this evaluation. So we helped choose the 6 properties. The first one was just, I think it was 900 square feet that we were harvesting the water off, and we put this one tank in. We took this one tank. So Jackie Suber had designed this garden. It was a native garden with 2 trees on either side of this rain garden. So we built a rain garden. So we harvested the water, and then when the tank got full, we would release the water into the rain garden. And then it was ready for the next storm. And it was ready for the next storm. So over 15 inches of rain, you get about 8,400 gallons to water those trees, which at that point didn't need any more water for the rest of the year. This year, to calculate the rainfall at 33 inches, we got 18,000 gallons. That's just one tank, 1,300 gallon tank, going out manually, you open it up and let it go to the river. This was the second project. Now you see one tank there, but this is 2 tanks strung together at the bottom, harvesting over 1,000 square feet. Those tanks in size were 865 each. This one has a pump. See that little kind of rounded cream color thing? That's a pump. It then takes that water and irrigates the backyard. This is that same garden where I moved the downspouts. We put in the rain garden, and then they got 2 tanks, 420s. Again, the same thing. We went from the rain garden. In this process, we were also putting in the electronic devices that measured every single drop of water. We had rain gauges on every property. We had sensors in all the tanks to know how much water was being collected. We had something called a weir in a rain garden that would be triggered if the rain garden filled and then ran out, if it was overflow, it measured the amount of water coming out. So that the city actually was collecting data for the first time on all of this stuff. Then we tried these guys. I learned that I don't use these tanks. And the reason we had to have these engineered, 1 gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. These things hold 16 1,500 or 1,000 gallons. So that's 8,000. Do the math. So they were afraid if you strapped it to the garage wall, it would have pulled the wall off in an earthquake. So they made us put it on a concrete pad. This is what the engineers did. Concrete pad. You see the man's leg? See where his hand is? See that steel post? 6 steel posts all the way around and 3 feet of concrete and 2 feet above this post. And that's the only way to safely contain that from falling over in an earthquake. So that cost more than the whole installation was doing it. Then we went to these guys. This is 4. These were called Stormwater. We got these in from Australia. They each hold 500 gallons, so that's an array of 2,000. They are all strung together in different ways. You know, every loop, we could isolate one tank. It was not in a very good neighborhood. And so we didn't know if one was damaged. We didn't want the whole thing to leak, so we plumbed it so you could turn off one array or one tank, and then you'd still maintain the water. This one again needed 4 steel posts for each tank. And this was the last one where we did an underground. So you see this property is kind of sloping down. Okay? This is the rain garden we built in front. It's full of water. This is what it looks like without water. But let me just go through the plants. So the backyard, you're looking at a bird's eye view of this. You see the red arrows, that's the front yard. The backyard is the landscaped area with the tanks underneath. Those 2 tanks are strung together, so they're like one unit. When they fill up, they're used from a pump. It waters the backyard through drip. You can only use rainwater harvested through drip. Then when they fill up, it runs in a pipe out to the front and goes to the rain garden. Here's the tanks in the back. The yellow arrow is showing you that. Showing you the lid. That's the manhole that we can access where the tank pump is. That's what it looks like now. When you know there's anything there. And then when this collaborative ended, then the tree people and all the city agencies did tours and everything for a couple of years. We did all the maintenance support. So then in 2018, go to corrugated. This is a modern structure, corrugated metal tank, 5,000 gallons. Now this one, we started by collecting the water just to water the orchard, but ended up having more water than we needed for that. So we ended up adding more irrigation zones to it later. Santa Monica, another rebate. In this one, we found a 15-year-old underground chamber of the old-fashioned way to make an infiltration pit, which was dig a hole. It was about 4 feet wide. We found it with video cameras. 4 feet wide, around, 15 feet deep, and the structure was stacked bricks. With holes stacked so that there was holes or gaps in it. So that existed, and there was it was planned to take some runoff. We got a call from them this year because that overflow from the storms that we're getting. So we're going to have to add an extra overflow because of the volume of the increase of the water we're getting in the storms now. So permeable driveway, they got a rebate for. Rain garden up the cover right. Permeable walkway going to the front. There's the rain garden full of water. And that device there that's in the middle of those rocks is something that was called a mozzie flapper, which I put on the end of the pipe that's going to the rain garden. It's on a, so when the water comes out, it opens up, and there's no water, it closes, so no rodents can climb into the pipe. So Santa Monica, when we picked up that portage rain garden from the neighbor, then they called us to do their garden. This is them. Just actually took pictures of this in my computer. There's 2 gardens in the same neighborhood. So we did a whole thing with them. They just had construction that called us back because the construction guys destroyed it. So we'll do some repairs. So this one was just basically picking up the other side of the property and having to go to 2 rain gardens. So the rain garden starts on the right-hand side. We didn't touch the front entry, we just put a pipe underneath it so the water goes from one side to the other side. And we did the demonstration garden with the Las Virgenes Water District. And we did a whole demonstration with rainwater harvesting going into a rain garden. So this particular garden, we also did scripts for all the videos that they have on their website. The signs, you see the red circle, all have QR codes. And when you go to this garden, you get the plant list, the map of the garden, how-tos, some of them from G3, like how to do sheet mulching, how to build a rain garden. All of this is available on their site. You can just watch from home, or you can go see the plants too. Saxon helps us with all of the plant pictures, because he was doing his root calls low and immediate, very low and low photos for the root calls database. So we were able to use some of the photos for that. So this was a unique one. This was a hillside property. The right-hand side, we had 5 separate tanks. The tank at the top was his emergency water supply. So he always wanted to have the water there. But he doesn't want to hold it for more than 6 months. So we connected it to the next pipe. So when he wants to use it, instead of throwing it away, we open up that valve and it's being used for irrigation. And when it's empty, then we fill it with fresh water. Then the pump is on the second tank. The next 2 tanks are for irrigation water, which when the first tank is in the second tank, the line is empty, then we pump the water into that one. And then the last tank is used to water the trees in the front yard via gravity because it's up on a slope. So you see the 5 tanks. And the reason why we did this is because the whole yard was coming down and the roof was also coming down. So we just had the roof runoff go directly over to the tanks at each level. Now, this is a pretty simple one. Again, no rainwater harvesting yet. That was planned for the backyard once we build our ADU. But you see again, I'm going under, see the pipe that's going under what's going to be a path, going over to a rain garden. You see the boulders in the rain garden. And then here it is, I think this was last July. So it was only 2 years, 1 year, 2 years old at that point. And he only did a mulch path instead of doing hardscape in between. Santa Monica, 2 years ago. This is a hugel, a rain garden, and a fully native plant path. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about construction of a rain garden. You need roots to keep the soil open so that it absorbs the water. If you fill it with rock, there's no roots, and so it'll fall. So it won't infiltrate, it won't saturate the soil if it doesn't have roots. So the only place that I put rocks when I'm doing it is as the water's coming in, it has some turbidity to it, and I don't want it to wash away the stuff, so I put boulders there, so if it hits the boulder, that's fine. And then I just put cobbles in that section where the water's moving, and then when it fills up, it's going to come over to the overflow, and I put rocks there, usually 1 to 2 inch, 3 inch rocks, so that the soil and the mulch doesn't come up and clog the overflow drain. But other than that, there's no other cobbles in it. So the purpose of the rain garden next to the hugel is that they're going to work together. The hugel is a nursery for plants. So again, you're putting in all that organic matter, you're burying it underneath, you're creating a nursery environment for young plants. Because every increase in organic matter, you increase the soil capacity to hold on. So we got an award for this one. This was last year. This is a new technology, pretty scary stuff. Let me just go to the next slide so you can see. This is an auger. It can dig a hole in a day for a 5,000-gallon tank. No, this was 7,000 gallons. So sustainable, plant palette, 8 trees. the golden arrow board. So this one is up in Mandible Canyon. It took us a couple of years to design this. This is using everything that we knew and adding automation on top of it. One of the advantages of doing it is that we learn a lot, and the clients, the homeowners are really patrons of wanting to have this understood and are willing to support us in doing whatever we want to do. So the house structure is about 7,000 square feet. The different colors on the house represent the harvesting area. There's 3 separate unique areas where we're taking the water. And we did this so that it all goes through gravity feed. So the 2019 gallons are going to 2 underground tanks. The orange part is going to a 1,440 gallon array. The green part is going to a tank that's above ground that holds 5,000 gallons. The whole system, when it's full, then overflows out to the parkway in the street to not infiltrate because it's hillside, but it just goes in there, flows out. There's plants in there. If there's any cleaning that still needs to be done, the roots take care of it in the rain garden, and then it goes to the street. Here's during construction for the pictures, Saxon. So the neighborhood was a homeowners association, and they said, no, that's going to be ugly. We need to, we don't want it, it can't be hot, so we had to bury it by turkey, which was silly. And then we called this the water house. So this is a 5,050 gallon tank. But when you're harvesting water, you never completely empty it, because the biology in the tank is, we've got this area. The first couple inches is aerobic. It's got pollens and little tiny things that come through the system that aren't filtered out. In the bottom, there's not enough oxygen, so you have anaerobic conditions. So when you're taking the water out of these devices, you float in the center of that and only take out the water that's between those 2 layers. And then when you get down and they squish together, you stop pumping and you just leave it until you get more rain. So in the 5,050 gallon, I can harvest 4,873, because I keep a few inches. And every shape is a little bit different on how many inches I save. This one is under the vegetable garden and pollinator garden. The 14,000, there's 8 tanks all strung together at the bottom. And they're under them. You can see the pool as the placement. And then there's the rain gardens. Down in front, there's 2 of them. And when you're putting plants in the rain garden, there's some that can be covered with water when it's in full season, when it's in full rainstorms. Then there's some that the roots are usually covered, but not the whole plant. And then there's some at the top that has saturated roots, but the whole top of the crown of the plant is dry. So I use different plants for those purposes. Some can do all of them. So this one has complete automation. I have sensors in every single one of the tanks. This is a live feed from the other day. I have currently 19,000 gallons to take me through the summer. That's not enough for this 25,000 square feet garden, but it can lessen the tier 4 pricing. So I only about $150 right now. If I use the whole thing, it'd be about $300. But the advantage was not in the summertime. The advantage was all winter long. I don't just harvest. This total array is about 24,000 gallons. And how many inches of rain did we get? Oops. There it is. We harvested 1,444,000 gallons. Because we catch it, then we release it. And we catch it, and then we release it. So we have automated it to take over the irrigation controllers, to wait at least 72 hours. And it looks for the storms coming in. It looks for the space that's in the system. It says, is there any space that's going to take this next storm? The system says no. So it takes over the irrigation controller and it dumps water into the land. It dumps it in the safe sections, like the flat areas, the tree zones. But when it comes to the slopes, because it's hillside, you have to be careful. So I do those manually. So I look at it and go, oh my God, there's a prediction of 3 inches in the next one coming. I'm going to start dumping water on my own. So I manage the water on this property. And that's how I can go back and empty that 24,000 gallons and then catch the next one, and then catch the next one. That works to the advantage if I can have enough space between storms so that I can have a dry period and then dump, and then a dry period and then dump. If I get back-to-back storms like 3 years ago, we got 12 inches in December, I lost most of it because I couldn't dump and catch because it was just too much. Just a real quick one, while I'm here on time now, so. Just a real quick one, this is my current project. This is in the Gray Hills. We see on the left top a crocus lobata, about 300 years old. It was not properly cared for, so we decided to take the entire drip line of the tree and put DG on it. 3 inches. So it went over last February. I took the top of the tree, had the arborist cut it into manageable pieces. We put it all underground in 5 hooples. Took all the debris from the property and buried it with it, all the paper that we could find. They happened to have some moving van stuff from their business, so we got all that paper and put it in everything. So we're putting all that carbon in the soil. I planted the trees first. There's this property I put 23 trees in because 3 inch. Then I took the wood and we positioned that huge trunk so that we could get a mini mill on site, and we cut it into 4-inch slabs. It takes 1 year to dry 1 inch of wood. I guess we're going to be fast enough. So we took it to a kiln and dried it in the kiln in 3 months. And now the lower left is the remodel of his business with the wood as his entrance to the business. The countertop on the inside where the patients come in. And the fine carpenter that I hired for this he's in his 70s now, and he found a piece of walnut when he was a teenager. And he takes a piece of walnut and puts it into everything that he's done through his entire career. So they made the shape of the B, and they put the pieces of the countertop are welded together with the B from the walnut from Harold. It's Harold Green, Greene. He did the Library Ale House in Santa Monica. It's beautiful work, just beautiful. You have to check out his website. So in this property, we did 5 hooples, 2 rain gardens, 3 meadows, 23 trees. And the last count officially was 12,000. But Laura, I think I went back 3 or 4 times to get more plants from you. So the log that you see in the lower right is from also the tree. And a fire pit. Time for questions or no? You have time for questions?
A microphone up to the fire.
So I think it's, Kathy, you had your hand up?
I'm loud enough. The one you showed that has the emergency water supply,
Uh-huh.
where's that water coming from?
The city faucet.
Okay, so you just fill in that?
We put a hose bib right at the top, so all we have to do is turn it on.
Like a job for Steve.
And then we hooked it up to the next tank, so when we want to refresh it, we just open that gate valve. Because what happens is then the tank equalizes.
Yeah.
When it goes down, we close it and then fill it with water again.
Because you know, I talked to you about doing emergency water supply at my house, may or may not remember. So I'm gonna try to remember.
Yeah, so we could just do something like that. Yeah, he had barrels around, and at first we had a space, and I go, why are we having a space for those old barrels? We can just get another one of those. He goes, oh, that'd be great, 420 gallons in emergency.
Yeah.
Thank you.
great presentation. Have you found that people are more receptive? Well, actually, that's not what I want to put it. What do people push back on when it comes to rainwater harvesting? Or what do they need to be educated about most when it comes to this? And do you find that your clients have become, I mean, this is the thing, your clients I know seek you out because you have this expertise, but do you find that when you're just talking to people in general about doing gardens, that rainwater catchment, rainwater harvesting is something that they're aware of and that they understand?
No, when I do other lectures like the garden clubs and stuff like that, they're fascinated by it. They go, they don't think about it. What I find that's more perplexing is the general contractors that are building buildings will do these weird things. You know, like I'm trying to fix one now, where he put in 135-gallon tanks, 5 of them on each downspout. I was like, well, there's a better way. And then took them out at the end after he closed the permit.
Because the client
didn't know, and he didn't know how to educate the client. When I first started doing this, it was the city of Santa Monica. This is actually a better story. The city of Santa Monica made everybody do an infiltration pit. Everybody in the city from, I can't remember, like 1996, had to do an infiltration pit. And everybody and all the contractors I was running into, they're really pissed off. This is stupid. And when I decided to do the Green Garden Tour in 2004, I went to the city and I said, why are you making everybody do an infiltration pit? There was a gas leak on 4th Street in Santa Monica. MTEV, am I saying that right?
gasoline.
Gasoline leaked out of a tank, went into the groundwater, and clobbered an aquifer, contaminated it. So the city of Santa Monica lost 20% of their water supply for the city. They went, okay, well, how do we get that back? We have to fill the aquifer. So they made everybody infiltrate and predicted from the late mid-90s that by 2010, they would have infiltrated enough water citywide to alleviate they would have increase the concentration to an acceptable level. In addition, the company that did the bad at the beginning had to add an RO filter to the entire water system in Santa Monica. And in 2010, they increased their water supply by 20% by just opening the valve. So it worked. If you know that, why wouldn't you put in an infiltration? I was doing a consult in Santa Monica, and I was a contractor for them. And periodically we had to audit us to make sure we were saying what we were supposed to do. And that's when I found out I didn't know about the filter. Right? And Russell said, the client said, I have an RO filter. And I'm like, you don't even do that water because it dissipates the water and it's very salty. Russell said, you don't need to. The whole city is already purified. Cool. Is that answer?
You showed a corrugated metal cistern. Do those need the same types of supports as the other?
So that's relative to the site. That particular site is on hillside, and it was also in a seismic active area that was in Pacific Palisades. So we had to build a concrete platform that was 5 feet deep to put it. But if you're not in hillside, then structurally, you take that too. That's very heavy. 5,000 gallons is very, very heavy. So you have an engineer. It's not that expensive to get something like that engineered. So we'll say, this is where it is, this is the soil report, what do we need to do here? In some cases, those first ones, the 1,000-gallon tank, that's just sitting on a 6x6 surround, full of gravel, compacted, and it's just sitting there. But 5,000, because that one has metal gaskets that are in the concrete, hold it down, because you basically put it together, and then you have a food grade liner that actually where the water is. That's a 4-gallon tank.
I had a question. Do those tanks ever need to be washed out or cleaned out? I can't imagine trying to clean out $6,000 or 10,000 gallon tank.
So, not if you're doing it right. So the important thing is to spend the money that you need to filter the water going in. So in our case, we filter the water by putting a product on the gutters called Gutter Guard by Gutter Glove. It's a stainless steel mesh over a patented stainless steel thing. You never have to clean out your gutters. The only thing that can get into the gutters then is pollen, little things, and that can be just taken care of on its own. We've never had to empty the tank. We get a lot of calls from people saying, can you come and clean our tank? No. So in order for somebody to clean your tank, they have to be certified in confined space so that they understand the dangers of going into a tank. So it's not a cheap contractor. Thank you.
Beautiful work. I've done a lot of this garden. So yesterday I was listening to Brad Lancaster's webinar. You might have as well. Oh, can't hear me? Oh, it's loud. Sorry. Anyway, beautiful work. I've been to a lot of his gardens. Yesterday I was listening to Brad Lancaster's webinar. I think you probably were too. He talked a lot about gray water harvesting. Is that something that you either incorporate? More importantly, what are your thoughts on it?
My thoughts are no. I personally don't think that that's an option, and I'll tell you why. In certain cases it is. If you're on septic, okay. But we are citywide, we are plumbed to harvest that water and turn it into drinking water. And we're going to get to that point where we need to do that. We right now harvest enough water that we're taking that water and we're putting it into our aquifers and mixing it with, to keep the ocean from collapsing our aquifers because they're being drawn out. So if we have that ability, we have the plumbing in place to capture that water and turn it back into drinking water, how many people in this room know how much gray water they're going to produce and what plant it should go on? 50 gallons a day per person in the house? Where are you going to put it? I had one incident where the homeowner came to me midstream, the 20,000 gallon system, and he goes, what are you going to do with the gray water? What? So he did a whole house, showers, you don't do kitchens, you don't do anything with feces or meat, but you can do laundry if you don't have a baby, put it in. So I had a 126 linear feet long planter, and we did gray water in it. And then the plants died. I replaced them. The plants died. I replaced them. The plants were dying. I had the soil tested. It was full of phytophthora. Every soil-borne fungus that you could imagine came on this test. Because it was getting too much water in the San Fernando Valley in the summertime. It's just breeding all kinds of stuff. So we went through Garden Wallace at Wallace Labs and like, now what do we do? So we took out the plants. He goes, whatever you put in, you never can water. So it has to live off of its winter rains. So I put in Bacolinia California, which looked like the plants that were in the other part of the garden. We put it in and we never watered it. It was been fine, but we turned off the gray water. But the soil was contaminated at that point. So a lot of people do it successfully. I had another project where somebody said, oh, by the way, we're putting gray water in. So what I did with this one is the gray water came in and they basically build pits where it saturates down into a pit and then it soaks in. But it's only in like one spot. How am I going to do a whole zone and then bypass? So what I do on those zones where the gray water is I irrigate I say in the smart controllers that the soil profile for the plants is only 3 inches deep. So it does the surface watering, and hopefully it will find those sources of water that are elsewhere. But it's a dilemma. I don't know. there's not a book on it. But if you're lacking water, like in Arizona where Brad is. What's that? What's that? Yeah. So Alfred is coming up, and Alfred has a system designed by us that he's having lots of fun with.
That's my question. It was great talk, as always. Thank you. And you mentioned about leaving a few inches in the tanks always, which makes sense. But does it vary by tank size? Like a 420 tank, would that be a different amount than, say, a 2650?
It's about inches. So I like to leave about 8 inches in a round tank, and in the oblong tanks, about 10 inches. Because those have the scalloped edges, and so I don't get a full 8 because of the structure of it. So it's about 8 inches.
So 8 inches for any round tank, no matter how many gallons.
It's 8 inches, and then you calculate that around how many gallons that is. But what you do is the harvesting, the intake that's going to your pump, you set that on the rope. It doesn't go deeper into that 8 inches. You don't let it float on the bottom. You stop it from going down, and then it just runs out of water.
Thank you, that was wonderful. I have two questions that are unrelated to each other, but just in leaving the water in the tank, can you talk a little bit about like pest management?
So when you do a rainwater harvesting system that has a pump, you have to go through the health department, and there's vector control associated with it. So all the inlets going into a tank are screened with a specific mesh size so that no mosquitoes can get into it. Everything. The vents, you have to have a vent in the tank so that when the water goes in, the air can come out. Those vents also have screens on them. The screens are going to prevent rodents from falling in. Anything. So we use, in some of the systems, especially the underground ones, it's kind of hard to figure out how to do that. There is a device called a pure rain that we use, that the water comes into it. There's a funny rule in the county department of health that says if it goes into the tank, if it goes out of the tank, it has to go to the sewer. Okay, so let's not let too much water in. So we use this device that comes into the tank and goes through a screen filter underground. And when the tank fills up, the water can't go in anymore and it goes right to the overflow. So we bypass that regulation because we're not emptying the water in the tank. They're putting it in the sewer and having those kind of questions. Any other questions?
Thank you, guys. The other question is, I'm curious, like your relationship with the city. You talked a little bit about Santa Monica. Is that with DWP, or do you have a relationship with DWP, and like what are their thoughts on creating watersheds around your houses?
The departments that I work with are the Bureau of Sanitation, because we submit plans to them for cisterns if you've got a permit of it. Great relationship. They were part of the project that we did for the city. And so if I get the right people at the desk, they go, oh, okay, we'll just, we'll sign it. And then the health department, excellent. They've asked us to do a class for them, which was great. We haven't done it, but that was nice. LADWP, I've only interfaced when it comes to, when you get a water bill, part of the water bill is your sewer charge, which is about 50 cents on the dollar. So if you're using only outdoor water, you're not going to the sewer, and if you can separate that into a separate meter, you don't get that charge. So that's how we interface with the LADWP, is I create sub-metered outdoor pool fills, landscaping, hose bibs, and then have them come in and validate that. And then they get back on to pass. I went back and was saving $1,500 in the summer bill on her sewer charges.
I just want to give a shout out to that little booklet that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk, the watershed approach to California landscape. It's still wonderful. It was developed by G3, and thank you, and by the APLD. I just gave out 3 copies last week. So it is downloadable off of the APLD or the G3 or the Certified Urban websites. It's a really great little booklet for even for people who aren't ready to put in a $20,000
Exactly.
or 20,000 gallon cistern and just turn your downspout into your garden. That gives you all the information on how to calculate how to harvest rainwater from your roof. It's not that hard. It's a really great little booklet and good how-to. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much, Marilee, for a very interesting talk.